We're not in Portland, we're in Colorado, but you wouldn't know it by the screen. We've received 10 inches of rain this spring, which is way more than we normally do. So normally where it's brown and we're riding all season long, everything's wet now. So I thought I would take this time to do a quick review of the Alchemy Arktos 29 Medium. I originally had a ride planned for today, but it's been raining non-stop for about 2 days, I don't know, a lot of rain, and nothing's rideable, but I was going to go up and give the new trail Hard Money a shot, but I had a screw in my tire which was showing low pressure, and I didn't have the tools to fix it, so I took it to a shop, and they were going to take a couple hours. So between muddy trails, good trail stewardship, riding alone on a new, sketchy, possibly hard, dangerous trail with my lack of ability, I decided the universe is sending a pretty clear message that maybe I shouldn't ride today. So I figured I would take this time to review the Alchemy Arktos 29 that I just got, replacing an Ibis Ripley V4. The Ibis Ripley is about 1 year old, and it's an amazing bike, so there is absolutely nothing wrong with the Ripley at all. But I'm going to talk about the Arktos in 3 categories. I've barely ridden it, but I've had a little bit of time to take a spin on it. I've noticed some things that are pretty cool, so I thought I'd share them with you. So the other reason why I wanted to take this time, other than the universe telling me not to ride today, is that I wanted to get this video out, or just any video out really, on something that is important to me, that I'm thinking about, that's front of mind, that is not yet done by Alex Boguski and Lee Likes Bikes way better than I could have done. So yeah, man, you just have the best channel on the planet, and you always read my mind about what's important and front and center for me, and it's super cool that you're opening it up to people like me, you know, over 40, closing in on 50, not wanting to get hurt, but still wanting to have a hell of a lot of fun and stay fit. So thanks for everything you do, man. I super appreciate it. So I have a large Ibis Ripley that's just fully decked out. It's not top of the line, but it's really close. It's about an $8,100 bike, and it has full XT components. I really like Shimano's new stuff. 10 to 51 gear range, has XT double pot brakes. It came with performance front and rear suspension. I replaced the rear shock on the Ripley with a factory because I didn't like the lever on the performance. But that was about the only upgrade I did. Other than that, it's got a bike yoke revive dropper, which is by far the best dropper on the planet. They're doing such cool things over there. Highly suggest. But the reason I wanted to replace it is that I found that I was a little too stretched out over the top for really slow technical things. And I suffer a little bit from the size of that bike. And essentially, it was actually Alex Boguski and Lee's video that kind of started me thinking about this thing. And so I measured my rad, you know, which I thought was kind of, no offense, but I thought it was kind of a dumb idea at the time. Turns out they were totally right. I was on my Common Sol Absolute, and it felt like a glove, and it was amazing. And then I switched back to the Ripley, and I was like, why does this thing feel so big? And turns out, you know, I've got an extra 4 inches on my rad or whatever. All right, let's be clear. I don't deserve any of these amazing super bikes that people are making today. I really don't ever reach their limits. I'm pretty cautious and honestly still ride from a place of fear sometimes on really sketchy stuff, especially if it's got big consequences. I am just maybe a little overly careful. But here's the thing, I love riding. I think it's super fun. I love hanging out with my friends, love getting outdoors. And honestly, I love looking at bikes. I love thinking about bikes. I like thinking about the geometry, and I like thinking about the spec and trying to optimize this thing that absolutely is barely gonna benefit me. I could probably ride like a Siskiyou D7, you know, for 2,000 or whatever it costs, and be perfectly fine for the rest of my life. Probably ride about the same. The difference is that I really like amazing engineering and looking at it and thinking about it and riding it and tweaking it and honestly searching for the perfect bike. It's like a side hobby, right? So here's what I was looking for in a Ripley replacement. Carbon frame, deep seat tube angle, slack head tube angle. The Ripley was fine in both those categories. I would have liked maybe half a degree or even a degree more on the head tube, but other than that, it was mostly fine. I wanted a shorter reach. I wanted a, pains me to say it, but they're totally right. I wanted a rad that fit my body, same as the Commensol Absolute, which is my dirt jumper. And I wanted a little bit more travel to stop beating up on my 48-year-old body. So this bike on paper met all of those specs. I also wanted a solid rear triangle that didn't feel like it was squishy when it was climbing. I came off of a Scott Genius 710 2x11, I think, and then I came off after that I had a GFC, a YT GFC Pro, CF Race Pro, which is amazing, but real squishy on the climbs and real plush on hover bike mode on the downs. So I basically wanted the GFC on the downs with the Ripley on the ups. And when I kind of thought about this geometry myself, this is the bike I would have put together. Spec aside, this is the geometry that I would have put together and exactly the travel that I wanted. So when I found this, I was like, well, I haven't really used all of this Ripley yet. I felt really bad about selling it prematurely, but I decided to call Alchemy and say, look, I love your bike. This color is amazing. I've seen them only put out amazing colors with one exception. We'll get to it in a second. And color matters to me because I'm a dork and I love pretty things. So this is the bike. This is the perfect bike I would have designed. And then there came the spec. They have a GX build, they have an XT build, and an X01 build. And they're all amazing, and they're surprisingly reasonable. This bike cost $6,200. So it actually cost thousands less than the Ripley. The only difference was the carbon rims, which is a big deal. But still, it's just amazing to me that they can put together this bike for the price they do. The XT had full XT components. I think it's 10 to 52 on the back. Has XT cranks, XT brakes, like I said, XT shifters, and Fox transfer dropper post, DPX2 rear shock, 135 on the travel on the rear, and 150 on the front on the 29 model. So I bought the 150, 135 version. You can also do mullets, and you can do short travel, and you can do long travel, and they just change out this linkage to make it work. It's really cool and efficient. It seems to me like Alchemy is taking pages from the book of like Volvo, where they have fewer components and they just get really good at manufacturing those components, and it ends up saving the money that they can then pass along to us, which is a really, really cool thing to see in the industry. Their paint jobs are amazing. I have never seen paint jobs as consistently cool as them. So I contacted them and said, hey, I know that there's a shortage everywhere and I'm not in a hurry because I have this amazing Ripley. When can I get a bike? How can I get a bike? Can I put a down payment? The new 2020, this is the 2021, significantly better everything geometry-wise than the 2020 in my opinion. I would not have bought the 2020. The 2021 is fucking perfect. Anyway, so I contacted them and I talked to Joe and I said, hey, can I come take a tour? And I'd like to talk to you about buying one of these things. And he said, yeah, no problem. So I came down there and I didn't really get a tour, but I asked to test ride a medium, and Joe, to be frank, wasn't very helpful. I don't know why. He just seemed distracted and not really interested in selling me a bike. But I kind of, cornered him and I said, listen, can I sit on one? Can I swing over? They didn't have a medium. I said, well, okay, when can you get a medium? Can I demo one? He said, no, that's probably not going to happen because of shortages. Totally get it. But I said, okay, well then what if I put down a deposit? What is the return policy? He said, this great thing. You can put down $500. When your bike comes in, you have 14 days to ride it. If you don't like it, it's a no questions asked, full 100% return policy, and they just refund your money. And they're super cool about that. They honor that, which is fantastic. It's the only way I'm going to buy something this expensive and be stoked about it. So I kind of pestered Joe for the next couple of weeks, and eventually I put down a deposit, even though the bike wasn't going to be here until July. So that was like a 4-month wait, I think, is when I put the money down. And then Joe left the company, and he went to go work somewhere else, which I was actually not super unhappy about because I didn't feel like his customer service was great. And I felt a little bit dismissed, and honestly, like, my stoke about buying this new bike and my stoke on their design of the bike was just like annoying to him. So that really fucking bugs me. Customer service in general really matters to me because not only do I want to buy this amazing piece of machinery, I want to believe that the people who designed it and built it and are selling it are not assholes. So I actually almost didn't buy a bike from Alchemy because I felt like they could give a fuck about me. It really felt like walking into, you know, some of these high-end bike shops and trying to talk to them about bikes. They don't want to talk to you. If you're buying a bike, they want to take your money. But if you're not buying a bike, they're not interested in talking to you, even though they should realize that they're building these relationships that force you to come back over and over. Then in early May, they contact me and say, hey, your bike's going to be here in just a week or two. But, which is like 2 months early, right? Well, so I'm super excited, A. B, I have some explaining to do to my wife because I didn't actually tell her that I put a deposit down and that I was executing this whole grand plan because I figured it'd be a zero-sum game. Anyway, my irresponsibility aside, they were like, Bryce from Alchemy contacted me and said, hey, your bike's going to be here. However, we don't have the color you wanted, which is this color. Would you be okay with this sand color with the orange writing? It's also a super cool color. It's not as cool as this, but it's still cool. I was like, I really wanted that other color in XD build, but it's not available. I'll take the sand, get my dope bike, start riding. So I was super stoked, went to meet Bryce. He was incredibly helpful, great customer service. He picked up on the fact that I was incredibly psyched about this bike, and I could tell he was stoked for me, and that's all I wanted from those guys, other than fantastically perfect engineering. So I pick up the bike from Bryce. I immediately go and take a ride over on Hidden Mesa, and it handled great. I didn't dial in the suspension, I didn't check the tires, I didn't do anything. I just pedaled it up a super steep, short baby head climb, and honestly, it's the first time I've ever made that climb. Could the Ripley have done it? Yeah, the Ripley could have done it, probably. But the length of the Ripley and my stretched outedness over the top of it kept hanging up that back wheel over a couple of those little tech sections, and this didn't. And to me, what that means is that this is the right size. Similar geometry, better geometry, more travel. But again, I didn't set up the suspension. I don't know where the rebound was. I don't know where dampening was, and it still made it up a climb that I'd never made it up before. So that was a good sign. So I rode it down a steep section again. It did okay, but I didn't feel great. Didn't feel invincible or anything. But I got it back down to the car, or the truck rather, and cleaned off the down tube and went to go put it in my truck and realized that there was a giant sticker on the back that said L. So Alchemy had accidentally sold me a large again. So I wasn't actually as distraught as my friends were. They were really sad about about my shenanigans with Alchemy. So I call Alchemy and say, what is the protocol for exchanging the large that I don't want for the medium that I do in the same travel and the same build spec and same or better color? And Bryce says, we don't have anything, and we're not going to be able to get it. And he's super sympathetic and really nice. And he says, would you be interested in taking this gray on gray, which is, sorry Alchemy, but it's just ugly. Everybody's doing it. It's that plasticky, shitty, ugly, boring thing that you're going to hate in a year. Toyota Cement is the color of their paint. Yeti does it with their new SB, whatever. And I think it's 130. Anyway, I just hate it. And granted, I know a lot of people love it, so I'm sorry to diss on that color, but I don't, and this is beautiful. So I said, hey Bryce, I'm sorry, but I can't take that. Do you have any other color? And I would have taken it eventually, but I would have been sad about it, and then a year from now, I would have literally sold it because of the color, and that's ridiculous. But I never claimed to be a rational person. Anyway, so he says, are you tied to the XT build spec? I said, I do like XT, I really like the Shimano stuff, but what else do you have? And sure enough, he told me that this X01 build spec, which I've never used before, with the Guide RSC brakes. And he's like, we have that in the original color you wanted, in a medium, in 150, 135. And I said, well, man, that sounds great. Let's do that. What I owe you? And they covered it for me because it was their mess up, right? And they covered the upgrade for me. And this is my first time I've ever ridden full SRAM everything. And I gotta say, it's pretty freaking amazing. I mean, I still prefer the XT, but this is fantastic. But the most important thing is that Alchemy is a solid company to work with. And even though they made this mistake, and even though, you know, I was a little bit of a high maintenance customer because I kept pestering them about the thing I wanted, they took care of me, and I will forever be a fan of their company, even if they get giant and evil like Santa Cruz. So in short, I'm a huge fan of Alchemy and the way they handled kind of the mix-up and the shenanigans and supply chains and communication and everything else. I'm glad I stuck with them, because after I started working with Bryce, and he's really the only interface that I've had at the company, they've been super fantastic, and I cannot suggest doing business with them enough. You should buy one of these bikes. Okay, let's talk about the spec and Geom. So the spec is SRAM guide RSC brakes, carbon handlebar, something, I don't know, DMR, grips of some sort, they're fine. I'll replace them with ESIs. Tag 50 mil stem, full carbon frame, 65 head tube angle. I'd have to look it up on my phone, which is being used to record. Fox Float DPX. The seat. I want to talk about the seat for a second. When I first saw the spec on this thing, I thought, there is nothing that I'm going to replace on this bike. These are fine, but even if, I mean, pedals obviously, but I thought, there's nothing I'm going to upgrade. This is amazing. This is the first bike I've ever owned that I'm not going to upgrade anything. I was wrong. The seat they chose is an absolute torture device. It is a Sella Italia $20 Amazon XEC something, and it's dismally bad. But who cares, right? You're going to replace the seat with something you like anyway, unless it just happens to be something you already like. I personally believe that all bikes should not come with seats, like all bikes don't come with pedals, and they should just suck that off the cost. Because, or you can pay $40 to have placeholder pedals and seat. That's a great idea. Let the industry say, look, you're going to customize it anyway. Let's save some processing and shipment and, you know, supply chain problems. Let's just not give it a seat, not give it a pedals. If you want some shitty seat and pedals, we will charge you even $50 for both, and you can get going. Anyway, I replaced that. That's a WTB Silverado, or the Volt would be fine. They're still both fantastic. Okay, so that's about it. I threw some helicopter tape on the top tube, helicopter tape on the bottom tube, oh, I haven't yet put helicopter tape on the back, but I intend to. It comes with these little guards and guides right here, which is really fantastic for chain slap. A lot of bikes don't do that right now. It has a really solid bottom guard. It appears to be glued on. So I tried to put some tape under it, and I was unable to do that because I'd had to rip it off. It now has 2 bolts here for a water bottle, which is cool, and also 2 underneath, which is the old design, but they went ahead and kept it, so you can, yeah, have tons of stuff on your bike if you want. And I might start taking advantage of that to store my shit. This is a 32 tooth Eagle. This is a 10 to 52 rear cassette, and I think those are all X01. SRAM Dub X01 brakes. I'm going to probably replace this front with absolute black oval. I really like the ovals. I feel like they are less surgy, and so the oval combined with the i9 Hydra hubs really makes some of those tight technical sections where you have to do like a little eighth of a pedal super quick in your not power zone really more effective and smoother, so I end up spinning out the tire a lot less. It comes with amazing tires. I think it's even overkill, to be honest. Like this is an Assegai, Maxxis Assegai 2.5 wide tread up front, and I think this is a XO. And this is a Minion DHR2 2.4 wide tread on the back with also XO. These are beefy tires. They're fantastic. You don't need to do anything with them. I might even take off this rear tire and use it as a front tire later to put it and put an aggressor on the rear, just because it's such a good tire. I have barely ridden it at all, and especially on technical stuff. I only rode it up Floyd Hill once and down Floyd Hill once without ever having set up the suspension. I intend to ride it a little bit more, but there are some first impression things. I took it to a jump park, a little tiny jump park, and got in the air a little bit. So there's a few different things I think that I noticed already. And I'm going to compare it to the Ripley quite a bit, so if you're a Ripley owner, this will be helpful for you. the very first thing that I noticed on getting on this bike is that I feel like I'm on top of it a lot more than sunk down in it. It doesn't feel bad, it just feels different. And I feel like if I'm doing endos or tricks or wheelies or manuals, which I suck at all that, by the way, but if I'm doing any of those things, it feels a lot more reasonable to be on this bike than it did on the Ripley. The Ripley really didn't want to do any of those tricks without a significant amount of like body shifting entirely off the bike to get it to go where I wanted to. This one is much more of a fit for me. But in general, I noticed just being on top of the bike is interesting. Going uphill, even without setting up the suspension, was fantastic. I didn't slip at all with this rear tire and this suspension. I rode up a pretty technical spot with some loose over hard type stuff. And as long as you just provide the rear wheel power, it just sticks like glue to the trail and climbs great. I never felt like the front wheel was going to come up or wander off the trail or anything like that. Another indicator that this is the right bike for me and that I really like this geometry is that my hands stopped falling asleep. When I was riding on the Ripley, even if I was just going 10 or 13 miles just right down the flat local neighborhood trail, my hands would fall asleep, which is why I ended up getting ESI extra chunkies, and it honestly didn't help. I was just too stretched out over the front of the bike, and I have no core muscles. Right off the bat, I noticed that I was pedal striking quite a bit, and that was true for both the large and the medium before I set up the suspension. It turns out I was like 50 PSI low on this rear shock. So since I fixed the shock, I haven't really pedal struck at all, but again, I haven't done a ton of technical climbing. So I will do a follow-up review and take a look at that. So I definitely noticed the Super Boost on the back. The Super Boost has the rear end feeling a ton tighter. It just, and take this with a grain of salt, I've barely ridden it, but when I do jump it and things like that, it just feels a little bit tighter on landings. The suspension is really good. I don't notice it at all going up. It doesn't feel squishy, and going down, jury's still out because I've only ridden down Floyd once and that baby head trail once on the wrong size bike. But I will say that it feels much more plush than the Ripley. Obviously I have more travel. I've got this thing beefed up to like 220 PSI or something. So I intentionally have it very stiff, and it still feels pretty plush once I dial in the settings. The only downside of the Super Boost, which isn't really a downside at all, is that occasionally I've found myself a couple times I've hit my calves on the rear triangle, but I don't think that's a big deal. That's just probably me getting used to it. One of the first things I noticed when riding this thing up, some technical stuff, and one of my only complaints about the Ripley is that the rear tire on the Ripley would hang up when I would go over something that was sustained technical that had close together bumps. So I could pedal over the top of it like a tank, but it was so long that my rear tire felt like it was going to hang up a lot. It did hang up a lot. And that could have just been my riding style or whatever, but I noticed that on this bike, even though the wheelbase is almost exactly the same, my rear tire doesn't hang up. Whether I'm seated or whether I'm standing, I don't feel like my rear tire hangs up. I feel like it's easier to get that hump over those technical things. Another thing that I noticed, because I spent a lot of time in my basement while it rained with the bike, is that track stands are a lot easier. Again, I think this is just like, it again comes down to having a bike that fits you, but also, a little bit slacker head tube angle, and just a generally nicely balanced bike. When I was jumping, I felt much more over the middle of this bike immediately than I did on the Ripley. So the difference in the initial ride between the Ripley and the Arktos, I can't really speak to the initial ride on the Arktos yet because I really haven't had the suspension dialed in for a technical ride that demanded, some performance from the bike and me, honestly. When I first took the Ripley out, I demoed it from a shop that had the suspension. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had the suspension dialed in, and I felt like the thing was a scalpel. It was just like, wherever I wanted it to go, it just read my mind and went right there. So even the super gnarly technical stuff that needs a lot of travel, you could kind of get around because the bike was so precise and so reliable and so predictable. But when you really got on super chunky stuff like Apex, where your line matters, but honestly travel matters almost as much, I did find myself having to slow down. That's the reason why I got this bike. On my first run down Floyd, it was not good. Didn't go well, but I think that is almost all suspension and not being comfortable with the size of the bike. So it definitely felt less stable, but I don't think it is. Just today riding around, I felt like the thing was just locked in. When I went to go jump it at the bike park, it felt a lot more stable landing, a lot tighter because of the Super Boost. I think I'm super excited to take this thing and give you like a proper review once I have a chance to ride it on the downs. I will say, on the climbing, I don't think I lost anything at all from the Ripley. There's almost 3 pounds difference. This is 32.1 pounds, and the Ripley is 29.4 right now in its current config. I don't notice it at all. And honestly, it doesn't feel heavy. Even the rims, I didn't feel any difference at all. These are 30 or so, or yeah, I think 30 inch wide, 30.5 inch wide, and the carbon Ripleys are 35 wide. So I don't think there's much of a weight difference. If so, it's probably in the hundreds of grams range. But yeah, I didn't notice at all. I'll get back to you on longer rides and let you know if that continues to be the case. So thanks. Hit me up with questions. I'm happy to answer them.